Thank you, Director Odom. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Policy Subcommittee of the Board of Parks and Recreation. We'll start with a roll call. Commissioner Anderson. Commissioner Scott Barnes.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Haynes.
Here.
Commissioner Hughes.
Here. Commissioner
Johnston. And Commissioner Steele.
Present.
Thank you. So we have 4 present. Someone can keep me honest. If anyone else joins, that we can indicate that they are here. Just want to read this note regarding telephonic meetings. The Parks Board must vote on the record that the COVID-19 pandemic requires it to hold a telephonic meeting as permitted under the Governor's Executive Order number 16, and that contrary rules are suspended. If anyone would like to propose a motion to this effect, please raise your hand and I will hopefully be able to call on you. I can find hands. I don't know where hands are. Oh, Commissioner Hughes.
I'll make a motion.
I love that hand. Thank you so much. Oh, look, there are the hands. I got you. Commissioner Hughes, you moved, has made a motion. Is there anyone likes the seconds? Commissioner Scott Barnes?
Let's see. I'll second.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate it. Move has been made and properly seconded. If anyone has any comments on this motion, please raise your hand and we'll call on you. I assume that there are no additional comments. We'll call for a vote on it. Commissioner Anderson?
I'm sorry, I just joined. What's the, I literally just got on.
That's okay, electronic meetings.
Oh, I approve.
You've missed nothing. Commissioner Scott Barnes?
I approve.
Commissioner Haynes?
Approve.
Commissioner Hughes?
Approve.
I don't see Commissioner Johnston yet. Commissioner Steele?
Approved.
Thank you very much. The motion has passed. Just adding a note for our audience, that those listening at home, the policy committee members here are calling in remotely. They're in separate places. When I ask them to raise their hand, that's an action that is occurring through the software. So our one agenda item is item 08-2003, which should read that we are here as a committee to review policy 3000.1, which is naming of parks. If anyone would like to make a motion to approve this agenda item, please raise your hand. Commissioner Hughes?
So moved.
A second, Commissioner Barnes?
Second.
Thank you very much. Our agenda has been approved. We have a motion to approve. Are there any other comments, any additions or changes to the agenda? Any discussion? Okay, we'll do a quick vote. Commissioner Anderson?
Approve.
Commissioner Barnes?
Approve.
Commissioner Haynes?
Approve.
Commissioner Hughes?
Approved.
Commissioner Steele?
Approved.
Okay, thank you very much. So I don't know if you all have received a copy of the agenda. Of the policy, if you're familiar with it. And I want to just give a special thanks to Director Odom and to Ms. Frazier for providing a lot of good information. So we have our naming of parks policy here, and this conversation actually came about as a result of being asked by several members of our community to reconsider the naming of Hadley Park. And we know that this has come about as a result of several other things that have been going on in the larger and more global community. We've had other instances, I think, that are germane to this request regarding statues, one specifically in Centennial Park, and some other things that have been going on and concerns that have been raised and shared. And so as our policy sits today, we know that we have a caveat in there that says to us that no park once named may ever be changed, but I understand from legal, and Monique, if you can bring attention to who's representing legal on the call, if that individual is here, someone is here, that portion of our policy can be suspended, if I'm understanding that correctly.
Yes, that's correct. Mr. Tom Cross is on the line representing Metro Legal.
Good afternoon, it's Tom. That is a correct statement. You could vote to suspend, you could vote to change your policy.
Okay, so that's one piece. And I'm just giving information for framework and guardrails to help us understand what action can be taken at this point with regards to our policy. The other thing that's in here that I want to draw our attention to is actually on the first page of the policy in section 2 under objectives. And I specifically highlighted that that second bullet point on the objectives. It says ensure that names given to parks, recreational areas, and facilities are consistent with the values and character of the area or neighborhood served. So I think that there's a few, that's probably one of the strong guiding principles in this naming policy that as a parks board, as a subcommittee of the board, can help guide our discussion. So I would just like to open it up for any questions or concerns. If anybody wants to jump straight to a motion, we can take that as well. So raise your hand if there's something you'd like to contribute to the conversation. Commissioner Haynes.
So I went back and listened to the September meeting and the October meeting, and it makes me very proud to serve with each of you because I think we're being very thoughtful on this. Several questions I'll throw out just for deliberation. And David Ewing himself said this at the October meeting. There are 128 parks in our city, many of which are named not for individuals. So should one of the considerations be that we only rename parks that are not named for individuals? Secondly, how much public feedback do we want to get? Thus far, I think I've received 18 emails, 11 for, 6 against, 1 as a maybe. And I think in these situations, we probably need a policy where we solicit much more feedback. Do we need a notice provision within a certain distance of the park? Thirdly, should we limit this to 1 name change per year? I don't think each of us is serving to, hear name changes every meeting. So should there be a limit? Fourthly, when the name includes other public facilities, should that impact our decision? In this case, Hadley Park has Hadley Park Towers, Hadley Park Library, Hadley Park Tennis Center. Are there parks that are deserving of Freedom Riders Park that don't have other public facilities? Who pays for, if we agree to do this in these cost-burdened times, who pays for all the changes in signage? I don't think it's fair to Monique and her team to then have to go execute the cost of all the sign changes. So those are just some high-level questions I would throw out for deliberation.
Okay. Anyone else? I think Commissioner Hughes is trying to find her hand raised button. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Gentry. So I also reviewed both meetings, and I was not at the September meeting. I wish I'd reviewed it before the October meeting. I wouldn't have been as confused, but anyway. And I also have reread the policy, and I wanted to just bring a couple sort of high-level things for us to consider, similar to what Commissioner Haynes said. I had some of the same ones, but when I reread the policy, I noticed a section that I hadn't really paid attention to before, and that's section 4E. And it seems to say to me, and I don't have my policy open at the moment, it seems to say that if a park is named for geography, then it can be changed to a person or group's name. And I was wondering if that is the case, would that be true of the request that I understand is coming to us about public square park? Anyway, I know it wouldn't apply to Hadley. So that's just a question I have for Monique or Tom or.
And so just for do you have others, Commissioner Hughes? Okay, because I was just going to read that section of the policy so people could see. Would you like me to do that now?
Would you? Because I don't have it. I can't quite locate my policy.
Sure. So section 4 under criteria item E says, in the case of parks where only geographic, conceptual, or other generic names exist or have been proposed, and when such names are not of special historical, or geographical significance to the neighborhood, nominations may be made to name a park or park facility for a local or community leader non-living. Go ahead.
Yes, so I'd just like us to hear that and kind of see if that would apply to, because while I know we've received a request to about the Freedom Riders Park name for Hadley, I understand we're going to get at least a couple more requests. And so whatever we do, I would urge that we consider it being broad enough that any request that comes to us would go through that same lens of scrutiny, if you will. Mm-hmm. So just for food for thought, here are some of the things that I've been thinking about. So, I think about the rule of a person cannot be living. And I remember the Siegenthaler pedestrian bridge and the Judge Birch courthouse that were both named and dedicated during the lifetime. And I know those aren't parks, but they were both named and dedicated during the lifetime of those people, those men, those amazing men. And they were there and attended the dedications. And I just think that was the right thing to do to honor those particular individuals while they were living. And I would suggest, as we're looking at some potential changes anyway, that we strike the non-living and add at the end of the sentence something like, as vetted by Metro Historical Commission as historically significant to merit this honor, something along those lines. And that's under section 4A3. And then I also wanted to say under section 4L, no park names can ever be changed. I don't agree with that. And I think one idea would be we simply strike that line and adhere to the naming criteria outlined under section 5 for new parks. And maybe tweak that a little bit. Or the other thing would be no park, we could change it to something like no park once named can ever be changed unless the Metro Historical Commission deems the Metro Historical Commission deems the proposed new name as historically significant to merit the honor, or if after X days of public comments, the community is clearly in favor of the proposed name and the Parks Board approves it, something like that. So those are some thoughts that I'd had in rereading it, and I would advocate for us to be able to name a park for someone who is living, they're historically significant, and amending the policy so that we can change the name if it's merited, and we don't have to go for suspending the rules. It's built into the rules. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Thank you, Commissioner Hughes.
Madam Chair, if I might.
Sure.
I just wanted to, I think Commissioner Hughes asked a question about the current policy, and if a request came to rename a park that is not named for a historical figure, and the person is living, who's honored, we wish to name the park, would the policy stand? This current policy would have to be suspended. I think you probably answered your own question, Commissioner Hughes, for a living individual. And I also just wanted to interject and remind you all that in respect to Hadley Park, whatever you do would be a recommendation. Again, in respect to Hadley Park, the state would make the final approval in regard to renaming. So just want to remind you of that.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Anderson.
I agree with a lot of what you said, Terry. I do think we should consider, if a park's named for an individual already, not changing that and leaving that as is. And if it's a generic park like East Park, Church Street Park, that we look to those first for naming. And I know it's not a park, but we do have a little precedent with the Jim Fike building where Monique's sitting right now, when Jim was alive, we named it for him then. So we have done this before. And I think I would propose that we're very careful about changing any park's name for individuals, and that we rename for renaming parks that are more generic. I just want to throw that out there.
Okay. Anyone else? Any additional comments or questions?
And let me add one more. I'm sorry, Sharon. I apologize. And I agree with what Jeff said too. I think we're going to be careful. I think we're going to have a lot of requests, and I think we should be cognizant of that and how we and which requests are fine, of course. But how often do we take them? And also a time, do we, if a request comes that we really vet it, so we never do it in 1 or 2 meetings, maybe it has to take at least 6 months before something is renamed, so we really can vet it appropriately. I don't think we should rush ever to rename a park. And I'm not opposed to renaming parks, but I do think we should, again, have it where we really have to vet before we make that decision. And I'm not sure we need to, unless we have to, maybe I'm missing something here from a legal standpoint, have permission, or we might get input from Historic Nashville, but I don't think we should have anybody else making our, renaming our parks. I think Terry, maybe you were saying if just getting input for them or getting their permission. I don't think we should have permission from anybody else.
Yeah, I don't think she had permission. No.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
I think she. Go ahead, Commissioner Hughes.
I was thinking of it as another layer of our deliberation.
Yeah, I like that.
With the Metro Historical Commission about, is this person or this group, and I don't know the right and proper words necessarily, but historically significant enough to merit this honor.
Yeah.
Or are there skeletons in the closet? I don't know. So, but I was just thinking it would add to our a data points for deliberation.
Yes.
I like it from from vetting perspective. That's why I think maybe if we can add somewhere, if a motion is made to change the name, that it will take at least 4 months or 6 months before we make the final decision, just so any skeletons do pop up, just in case they're out there.
So it's interesting that you should bring up the term skeleton. So, I wonder, there's a couple of things. I think we should just be careful. And I don't know how many other policies we have that may look this way, that we're not mixing process and policy together. So there's the policy that tells us what we should do. And then there's a process of how to do it that I don't think should be part of the policy. So, if we say we're going to have, maybe we say there will be a renaming committee that includes someone from the Metro Historical Commission, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that person may not even be necessary given what the proposed name change may be, but I think we just outline the what needs to happen in consideration. I mean, the policy, create a policy, but the process is something separate and apart from that. Because I think what has happened when you use, like, I don't know about policies that use the term never, right? So, had I been around, I probably would have kind of thrown a yellow flag on the play for that, because we've now tied our hands. So we've done one of two things, right? We've either tied our hands to be able to do and take action, or we give the perception that we've intentionally blocked ourselves from being able to take action. And so the only thing, Commissioner Anderson, I would say against the never renaming it from an individual, it totally contradicts your agreement with Commissioner Hughes about vetting people. Because sometimes that vetting or what comes to light or what becomes an issue, doesn't happen when we name it or before we name it. And so I think that's where we are. And again, I don't want to make this to be about naming Hadley Park, renaming Hadley Park, but I think this is because the issue of renaming Hadley Park came up. But yes, that is an individual. Whether the individual was the slave or the slave owner is kind of moot to me from a personal perspective, because of the ties associated with the name. And so if we go back and look at objective number 2, the purpose for giving a name that we give is to be consistent with the values and character of the area of the neighborhood served. So the example I've used in talking this out with others that are not part of this conversation is to say, if you name a park after me and then 5 years later, my house gets torn down and you dig up some bodies under the floorboard, you might want to change the name of that park. And so, I mean, just to be honest, and so things come to light, or things just become so historical significance is really from a present point of view, right? So whether an activity or an action is has historical significance is really from your vantage point of the present, right? Some things that may have happened so many years ago don't really matter until they matter. And so now I think we just need to make sure that we do create the kind of flexibility you all are alluding to allow us to stay on the right side of the spirit of the naming policy, not the steps, not the checkbox items, but the spirit of this policy was to give honor and respect to the communities where these places sit, whether they're buildings, whether they're parks, et cetera, whatever we have the ability to place names on. And so as a public board, as a board that's here to sort of be a reflection of the community, I think we need to just make sure we're doing a gut check on the proposed changes to ensure that we are in a position to be a reflection of the community that we're serving. Our communities,
and I agree to a certain extent. I think I just want to raise the bar higher with a person has been named, a park has been named after an individual. And as Tom told us early on, never does not exist because you can suspend the rules. So that's there. But I just want us to make it very difficult, extremely difficult to change if it's already named for an individual. And maybe sometimes we need to clarify who that individual was, or have it in, especially in terms of Hadley, I would say, we got to make sure that we all agree or proclaim it was the Hadley we want it to be named for, right? So maybe there's clarification there. Again, we're not talking about Hadley, but I just want to raise the bar on changing a person that was named for and then go more towards parks where they weren't. So I don't disagree with you, Sharon.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Hey, Commissioner Steele. Commissioner Haynes, your hand is still up. Is that you want?
Yeah, I'd like to add a couple quick things. One policy and one process. And this is really a question from Monique and Tom Cross. At the Planning Commission, if we turn something down, it can still proceed to council and get approved. If all of a sudden, for whatever reason, the naming committee and the Parks Board turns something down, can it still proceed to council and to the Historical Commission and get passed? So I think we need to answer that question from a policy perspective. Secondly, from a process perspective, and I agree with you, Sharon, we need to separate the two. One suggestion I would make is we need to pull the minutes from the meeting in which it was named and really understand the context of that discussion on the naming at that point in time. And I know we have good records of all that. I think that needs to be part of the process.
You got those minutes from 1912, Monique? Just kidding.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know that we have those minutes for the naming of Hadley Park. What has been clear about Hadley, and I know this meeting is not about specifically Hadley Park, but what has been clear about Hadley Park, that it is conclusively inconclusive as to who the park was named, as to, for whom the park was named. So I think that has come from a number of local historians, and folks in the city. So that I just wanted to say that on that piece. But then I would defer to legal in respect to your question, Commissioner Haynes, about decisions by the Parks Board being overruled or undertaken by Metro Council or another city commissioner board. I defer to Tom.
Okay, this is Tom. The council, by and large, has left the naming of parks to the Parks Board. They don't typically involve themselves in decisions like that. Is it possible that the council could choose by ordinance to overrule a decision of the board? Yes, but I don't recall that ever happening. The path that I would expect this to take, if this committee recommends a different policy to the board, and the board adopts it, and then subsequently votes to change the name of the park, the next step would be asking the Tennessee State Historical Commission for permission under the statute that gives them some authority here, not the council.
Okay. And so here's, and Commissioner Steele, I see your hand. I just want to keep this thread going. And Commissioner Haynes, help me understand a little bit more your thinking behind why we need to understand that. Because what I lean into is, the relationship we have with the state on the school board around charter schools, right? I can approve, I can disapprove, I can not approve a charter, and the state can still make that decision. I don't know that their ability impacts my position, my values, on how I would vote on a charter school as a member of the school board, even knowing the state can do something contrary to that. So help me understand your thinking about why that piece of information is important.
Sharon, I don't think it's impacting the decisions we make. I think we just need to understand it. If in fact, as Councilor Cross said, the council can override us, we just need to understand that. Nothing more than that.
Okay. Commissioner Steele?
Yes, just commentary around the naming of parks around individuals that Commissioner Anderson was discussing. And the point that you brought up about historical significance being of the vantage point of the present. And I love the example of, if you die and we find these bodies under your home, we need to relook at that policy. I get it, but it brings it home because that is so much of the discussion that we're having in the public across America. And wherever you sit on that discussion, it needs to be discussed. I don't think that we need to make our policy so narrow that we can't relook at those things because things come to light every day. And the time for which it was founded usually was around Jim Crow era, usually was around an era where you wanted to suppress and oppress a group of people. And so as we're thinking about naming parks, not naming parks for individuals, renaming parks for individuals, I would say that I would be against that. Because again, things come to light. And I recognize, that we need to, in naming, we need to do our due diligence, but we also need to do our due diligence around the history of why that thing even happened. And so I just wanted to speak to that. And Monique, Director Odom has already said this particular park, the history is inconclusive. On the naming of it. And so what we do know that happened in that park for which Council Lady Hurt is bringing this forward, gives honor to that area. I have some other comments as we get to those, but around the individual aspect of it, naming parks, not renaming parks for individuals, I did want to speak to that.
Yeah, so I think Commissioner Anderson did clarify, we at least want to make it difficult, right? So it's not that it can't be renamed, but there may possibly need to be. So one of the things I would suggest is as we look at the policy, maybe there is a section called renaming, right? So if that is a thing that needs to happen or comes to us, what is our process for renaming? What's the process for renaming? So let's say, something, if for example, the part that Commissioner Hughes pointed out, that it's something about the geography, right? So whatever, I'm being really random here, but if the entire landscape of that area changes and, we start planting a bunch of pine trees, we may want to rename it. That's a real reflection of the pine trees than something else that was there before. So that may not be as difficult, but I agree that we should have at least a process. And it shouldn't be this randomness of anybody being able to walk up and wanting to change the name of a park, whether it's named for an individual or anyone else, because of what was pointed out at the very beginning, I believe also by Commissioner Haynes, that there's a cost that's going to be associated with that, right? So there's going to be a cost associated with, every piece of signage that we have, every piece of print material that we have is going to have to be revisited. I don't think, again, that should be a reason to not. I think it should just be a part of the planning of doing so if the decision is made to make the change. I do want to go back onto something else that Commissioner Haynes pointed out. And Director Monique Odom, please forgive my ignorance. Just help me understand the park's relationship with Hadley Park Towers, and the other entities that are associated with that. So are we expecting Hadley Park Towers to change its name? I would say no. The library and the tennis courts.
So all of the property there that is under the purview of Metro Parks, which is the park, the tennis center, and the community center, could possibly be renamed to reflect if the name of the park were renamed. In terms of the Hadley Towers and the library there, that is under the purview of MDHA and the libraries respectively. So they could choose to proceed however they so chose.
Okay. So that would be the case in any other park situation where there's related entities that have picked up on that name. Okay. Okay. Any other comments or questions? Any other concerns? So the thing I would add to that, Commissioner Haynes, I think is a very good question about that. So I think we have two things that are in front of us right now: is taking action, a short-term action, to be able to then respond if we feel if this is an option. Taking short-term action now with regards to the policy to be able to respond to the request that has already come before us. And then there's some long-term changes to the policy. I think, again, having been a certified parliamentarian, I will tell you, we want to make sure that we're not making policy changes to practice failure avoidance, but that we can be more proactive and engaged when these types of requests come to us in the future. So I think part of the concern that's bubbling up in the community, at least that I've heard and that's come to me, is that we've created policy changes to prohibit addressing concerns such as the one that has been raised, and I don't think that that's the posture. I pride myself on being a practitioner of not assigning negative intent, so I do not believe that that is the spirit and the intent of this board. But I know, and I think that we're being thoughtful, and I think the desire is to ensure that we are adhering to some other part of this policy, which starts off right in the beginning, that says, and I also highlighted it, it says that we want to make sure that we have a process that is systemic and consistent, right? And so I don't know that we have that today because of some other things that have come to our attention about name changes and other adjustments that have been made in the past. So I would now just open it up. I know many of you have a hard stop at 1 o'clock. We're at 12:32. And so I would just want to open it up and just ask, what is the pleasure of the subcommittee at this point? Commissioner Barnes and then Commissioner Haynes.
I wanted to raise a point about the naming after somebody who was alive. And I think there is precedent for that. In fact, it is allowed in our policy, but I think there are inherent risks. What was your skeletons under your house? What was the example you gave?
Yeah, right.
But I do think that there are inherent risks if we do amend the policy or change the policy to allow for living people. And there are examples of, I was looking, up, and I think Nixon Highway had been named in 1971 and then had to be renamed after, Watergate. And I think there's just lots of examples of kind of moments when that can be risky. I think the examples that have come up in recent times of being named after a person who was still alive was kind of a fantastic honor when they were nearing the very end of their lives. So I think that there could be a way for us to change the policy where we can be flexible enough. I don't know how you would say it exactly. What's not, just be careful on the language, but to consider allowing us to be able to honor somebody who might be at the very end of their life, where the risks are not as great of maybe coming in contact with some skeletons in their closet.
Did you get that from Hamilton? When they talked about a guy they named a street after him and he said all he had to do was die? I'm just checking. No? Okay. Go ahead.
I think that there's I wanted to add another comment about geographic areas. And I think that some of the geographic areas are generic and some are not. And so I think that we, as we're kind of looking at that component of opening up our, the policy, that we make a distinction, because sometimes it's not.
Okay. Okay, Commissioner Haynes.
Two other quick points. The first, I don't know if this is policy or process, Sharon, but if the policy committee suspends the rules, and I agree with everyone, and I think never changing a name is a bad policy. If we happen to embrace the new name, but don't necessarily think it should go with XYZ Park, but we're better off assigning it to another park, do we have that latitude as a board? So just think about that as a policy and process question, because I think the name Freedom Riders Park, especially with the significance Nashville played, is really important. Is there a better park? Is there a park that's struggling, like Church Street Park, where changing the name to Freedom Riders Park helps, solve the programming and activity of Church Street Park? So I open that up for discussion. I don't have an answer, but I think it deserves this policy committee and ultimately the Parks Board to think about.
So Commissioner Haynes, what I would say, and I've actually thought about that, right? So I think when the requests come, right, so a renaming, right, so this is the difference between asking that a park be named for someone or some group versus the renaming of a park. So the renaming already has a location tied to it. So I think it really depends on how the request comes to the board, right? So I want to make sure that we have a park named after Monique Odom. I don't care where you put it, but because she was such a wonderful parks director, you still can't go nowhere. We want to make sure she's remembered, right? And we want to pay tribute to her. So I think it depends on how the request come. So that would really be, and again, just to use Hadley Park as an example, that would be sort of almost like a negotiating point. And I don't think that's what the request is. And so something else I was going to say, and I cannot remember what it was, but keep going. Anyone else? Mr. Hughes. You're muted. I can unmute you. Go ahead.
Every system is just a tiny bit different, y'all. Sorry. All right. Okay. Now I don't remember what I was going to say. So I wanted to probe that, Commissioner Gentry, just a little bit. So it's playing out. You're doing a great job of giving examples. So if this request for renaming came to the board and we all agreed that we love the name of Freedom Riders as a park name, but there's not consensus on changing Hadley. Is there a scenario where we could offer, and if that's what you were meaning by negotiate, maybe that's just what you meant by negotiate.
That's what I meant.
Okay, all right, okay.
Yeah. So
I've wondered about that also.
Yeah, so I think the concern that would raise is it changes the intent behind the request, right? So we should all be very clear and understand that the intent behind the request to rename Hadley Park is its ties to slavery, whether that's through a slave or through a slave owner. That's where that request has come to us, right? So let's just be very clear about that. And so the impetus, right, and the updraft and the fuel for that is everything else that's going on in the global community, in our global society. So let's not, we make no mistakes about that. So we just have to be careful that when things like that come, because my rebuttal, if I rebut that with, nah, but I'm gonna give you Church Street over here on the corner, it says, I'm okay with Hadley and all it represents in your community, but I'll give you Freedom Riders over here on Church Street. So we just need to be very mindful of, are we honoring the request when we do that? So again, if the request is, I just think a park or some kind of way we need to honor the Freedom Riders, then we can offer up whatever. I just think we just need to be very careful and make sure that however we respond, that we are honoring the spirit of the request. And we're saying, and we are very clear what we're saying no to. Because trust me, the public will not be confused about what we're saying no to. Again, I don't want to get into the renaming of Hadley necessarily right now. I just want to make sure, I want to ask two questions here at 12:39 now. Do we want to take action in this subcommittee to allow us to consider, because right now our policy doesn't even allow us to consider the request to rename Hadley Park because of the never change a name part. So my question is, are we willing to consider the suspension of that portion of the policy here, then bring that back to the televised meeting so that we can then consider it? Because we can't even consider renaming Hadley Park as our policy states today. Commissioner Hughes, your hand is still up, but I think that's from before, or you have something else to say.
Well, no, I'm not ready to say it. I think I do, but.
Okay. Anyone else?
Okay, so I'm ready. I'm sorry. Would you like to recognize me? I'm so sorry. I just burst in. This is Commissioner Hughes speaking, bursting in. So we sort of outlined that we would have a meeting or two to revisit the policy. It sounds to me like we have consensus that we need to revisit the policy. It sounds to me like we have consensus that we need to make some changes to the policy. So I also know that there's some time pressure on the request that's before us and another request that's coming to us. And so I'll just venture a motion and then we can, how about that? I would like to move that we suspend the rules in order to consider the request in front of us to change Hadley Park to Freedom Riders Park while we continue our work on policy changes.
Okay, so I'm going to call for a division of the question.
Okay.
Flexing my parliamentary motions and just get the first part of the motion first. I want to keep it clean about what action we're taking right now. And I would also offer a friendly amendment to take out the name of the park. We just want to be able to reconsider renaming a park. This is not about Hadley.
Well, right.
Okay. So suspension of the rules. So I would propose a friendly amendment that you move to suspend the rules, to suspend the portion of the policy that says we can't ever rename a park, and just leave it at that. Can you restate your motion? Now that we're totally mortified. And then you can make the second part of that we continue to revisit. That can be a separate motion.
Okay, but I would like it. I mean, I just want to make sure that we do continue.
Yeah, that can be you can make that motion subsequent to this one. What I don't want to do is I don't want someone's lack of an interest in renaming Hadley Park to keep us from discussing the policy. If you keep them together, I can say I don't want to rename Hadley Park, so your whole motion fails.
Okay. Well, I'm happy to leave the name out.
Okay.
All right, so I move that we suspend the rule that says you can never rename a park.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion? Commissioner Steele?
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor and a second. Any further discussion?
I don't see why we need the motion because we were told by legal we already have that right to do that.
But
right.
So correct me, Tom.
We already have that right to suspend I mean, we're being redundant here. It's a matter of we want to redo our naming policy, and I think we all agree we want to redo our naming policy.
Okay.
But we can suspend it any time. Isn't that correct, Tom?
We can, but I do believe we have need a motion to do so. Mr. Cross?
And I would just remind the committee that what you're doing is making a recommendation to the full board here. So
right.
I interpreted that motion was a recommendation to the full board to suspend the rule.
Right.
Correct. So, but the motion is still necessary is what we're trying to clarify, Mr. Cross.
To make a recommendation to the board, I think you probably should have a motion.
Thank you very much. So we have a motion on the floor So Mr. Cross, just for the purposes of accuracy of this meeting, does Commissioner Hughes need to restate her motion as a recommendation?
It would probably be best for clarity if she did, but that's, I think, the way everybody has interpreted what she has moved.
Commissioner Hughes, I do apologize. You're going to get so much practice making motions today. If you can restate the motion as a recommendation.
I will do that. I am not great at making motions. So I move that the policy committee make a recommendation to the full Parks Board that we suspend the rule that says that no park once named can ever be renamed.
Okay, thank you. And may I have a second to that? Commissioner Steele.
Second.
Okay.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a motion on the floor. Is there any additional discussion? Commissioner Haynes and then Commissioner Barnes.
So if we make this recommendation to the full board, which I'm okay with, doesn't the policy committee need to address the questions that have been asked today to try to come up with an appropriate new policy for renaming parks to go with the suspension of the rules?
Possibly, yes. But so there's two things that are going to happen here. So when it goes to the full board as a recommendation, this at least allows us to consider, right? But you are correct, and that goes to Commissioner Hughes' second part of her second motion that she's going to make, is that the policy committee continue to meet to revise the larger naming of parks policy. So it's still a process, right? It's still a process. But right now, we just don't have, our policy doesn't even exist to allow us to even reconsider the changes, a change. Commissioner Anderson?
Just for the record, because there were some emails going around that were not very nice. I am not opposed to the term freedom riders. I want to say that in this meeting. So I think we should have a park with that name. I just want to say that, number one. Number two, I heard something earlier, if someone can clarify. I can't remember who said it now, that there's a rush or a time, we want to do this quickly for some reason. I think it was a comment like there's a time, a reason we want to go ahead and discuss Hadley as a board instead of going through the policy and then going back to that topic. Did I hear that right?
I think that's probably what I was going to respond to. So I don't think that we, and anybody else can chime in, I don't think that we're rushing to do anything.
Okay.
So I don't want that to come across. I think the dis-ease that is swirling in the community right now is that as we're currently positioned, we're not even considering it. And so we just want to, what we're doing here is trying to get us in a position to even consider requests for renaming. But to Commissioner Haynes's point, there's still more process that we may want to wrap around that. Now, what I will say that may sound contradictory, I don't want us to hide behind the process or the creating of the process and have it come across that we just put another stumbling block in the way. So we know that there's a lot of sensitivity around this specific request that has led us to this conversation, and we just need to give honor to that. But we want to make sure we're leaning into doing what's best and doing what's right from a community perspective and standpoint. Commissioner Barnes and then Commissioner Anderson. Is that your name? Hand still up?
No,
I'm sorry. Commissioner Barnes. I'm sorry, Commissioner Anderson, does that help? Did that?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, Commissioner Barnes.
I just wanted to make the comment about the motion and that to me, I thought the point of this meeting was to examine the policy, and there's been such great conversation. I think we're really, it sounds like a lot of us are in agreement with making changes to the policy. So maybe this might be a process issue, but if we're suspending the policy, we're not amending the policy. And I would be a fan and in favor of amending the policy So correct me if I'm wrong, but I was hoping that we were getting closer towards amending the policy.
Correct. And I think that's the second part of Commissioner Hughes's point, is that there's more work to be done. So even the suspending the portion of the policy, we're not suspending the entire policy. We're suspending that portion of the policy that says that we can never rename one. Okay. So that at least opens up the door for us to accept renaming requests. To Commissioner Haynes's second comment that he's made a couple of times, and I believe which will be Commissioner Hughes's second motion, which may not even be necessary because I think that's why we exist, is to revisit and continuously look at the policy, is we now need to say, now that we are open to accepting requests, we really need to take a look at the policy and say, how do we want to handle renaming requests? Because we don't have a process for doing that. Does that make sense? So I think it's really opening the door to get the request, but we still have work to do. And we need to be very clear with the public that we need to make sure that we've got our ducks in a row in the renaming process.
Oh.
Commissioner Hughes?
Yes. So in an ideal world, we would be looking at our policies without a request in place. And I think what's difficult is we are realizing that our policy needs work and we have a request in place. It's very hard to separate the two.
True.
So the second part of my motion will be, or if anybody else can make this motion along those lines. I do think we have the public swirl, I think you put it, to consider, and that being able to talk about this would be helpful as we noodle around with how we exactly want to change the policy. But hopefully we don't noodle too long, because I think so. Thank you. I don't know if that helped at all.
I think we understand that there's not necessarily a need to rush it, but there are eyes on this board with regards to the request that is already out there. And so we just need to roll up our sleeves and do the work to be able to make these kinds of decisions. I mean, the optics are what they are, and we can't change that. And so, and I'm not saying that, we're here to fold to quote unquote public perception or public opinion. But if we, again, go back to just the second bullet point in this policy, that if we get to a point and we find we're in a situation where a name of a park does not reflect the values of the community in which it sits, then our own policy, even as it states today, is problematic if we're not able to reconsider that name. And again, as I think it was Commissioner Steele that pointed out, a lot of these names came about in an era in a time where it was the spirit intent in the naming to minimize and to remind individuals in that community of what their place was or wasn't in that community and in the larger society. So I just think revisiting the policy with the intent of honoring the spirit of the policy and honoring the communities that we're here to serve is our call and our responsibility at this time. And to the point about the other entities that are named, maybe maybe they're waiting on us. Maybe they're waiting on us to respond to what's going on in the global society to make it easier for them to make that decision. It's not easy, but it doesn't mean it's not right. Any other comments or questions? So we have a motion and a second on the floor to suspend that portion of the policy. And just for the record, that line exists in section 4 under criteria, item L, to suspend section 4, item L in the current naming of parks policy. Are you ready for the question? Or do a roll call vote so that I don't miss anybody, since I found my listing of names. Hey, Commissioner Anderson.
I approve.
Okay. Commissioner Scott Barnes,
Approve.
Commissioner Haynes,
Approve.
Commissioner Hughes,
Approve.
Commissioner Steele.
Approve.
Okay, thank you very much. The motion passes. So we at least are now in a position to accept and consider requests to rename parks. We do already have another meeting on the books, I believe, prior to our, when is it? I don't know. Thank you.
I believe it's November 2nd. It's next Monday, I believe.
Okay, good. November 2nd, we have another meeting. I would ask that you all get a copy of the current naming policy and think in terms of from initial naming, what are the modifications we need to make? And then in the spirit of adding this section on the process for renaming, what should that look like and feel like? Any concerns, any other things that we want to, we think we should assign as homework for ourselves prior to our convening on November 1st?
I think it would be helpful. I think somebody had raised this point in our last meeting. Sorry, can I just jump in here? I think somebody had raised some specific questions about like, why did the Cane Ridge Park get renamed? I don't think we ever got to the bottom of that one. And I think it would be helpful for us to get a sense of what best practices are in other cities and what other parks departments are doing. That might just be a helpful benchmark for us as we're making decisions.
So are you volunteering to do that homework, or are you asking of that from someone else?
I would love help in doing that from the Parks Department.
So it may not be that difficult to pull policies from other parks boards. Director Odom?
I'll reach out to some peer cities and see what their policies are and their practices are on that. And then in respect to Cane Ridge Park, I'll share that information. Janet did a great job researching that, and that's actually an inaccuracy on the spreadsheet that we sent you. It wasn't actually a renaming. It had not officially been named, but there's some history behind that, and I will share that with all of you all.
Okay. So if we can get Ms. Fraser to send out that naming of parks piece, that write up around Cane Ridge, also the full naming of parks policy to the full board, have it top of mind, that would be very helpful. Commissioner Hughes?
Yes. May I make the motion, the second part of the motion? Or is that a moot point
Yeah, I think it's a moot point now. We're actually reconvening. We're meeting again on November 1st to start that work. Thank you, though. Anyone else? Okay, so I think we have our marching orders. Reading up.
Sharon, is that on the first or second?
November 2nd. Did I say first?
I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. Let's make sure. Okay.
Yeah, second. It's as long as it's not a Tuesday prior to. I'm sorry, guys. I teach a class before our board meeting, so it's hard for me to meet prior to that. So I hate to take up extra time from your calendar, but this is the best I could do. So we'll convene on November 2nd. Hopefully you will have read the policy. You will have come up to speed on the Cane Ridge issue with the documentation Ms. Fraser will share. And Director Odom will do a little legwork and outreach and pull some policies. And I would say when we talk about peer cities, Director Odom, can you say a little bit more about that? Because I just want to make sure that they are demographically reflective of Nashville.
I will make sure that they're demographically reflective. Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. Anything else? Be there no further business, I will accept the motion to adjourn, or can I just adjourn? I mean, what are we doing? I call us adjourned. Thank you all very much. Great. I appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Sharon.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.